I am thrilled to introduce to you today Kerri Tracht. She is a debut author of a women's Christian fiction book called The Long Road Home, and it looks very interesting. In fact, I just put it down on my KU, Kerri. I saw it was on KU, so I went ahead and ordered
Yeah,
it. So, Kerri, welcome to Between the Lines. I'm thrilled to have
thank
you here.
you. I am excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, this is exciting. So, Kerri, one of the things you pointed out, and I don't know if it was on your website or if it was just in the notes on the form that you filled out for me. This is, you made the comment, so I'm not trying to age you, but you did say I'm 65 years old with my first
Mm,
book. So I
Yep.
was like, yay, how exciting. So let's talk about that. What drove you after all? I mean, have you wanted to write your entire life?
Yeah.
When did you get this writing bug that all of a sudden decided to wait until retirement to do something with?
Well, I would say that I have probably wanted to write since not long after I learned to read. So I've always thought writing was going to be an awesome thing to do. And I probably have been writing all my life. I wrote stories, I wrote poems, songs, anything I could. But sadly, they got stuck in a box in a closet somewhere, and heaven knows where they are. I know my mother kept a few. But they just, it was something that just was, one day,
Yeah.
got married young, raised a family. I homeschooled our children and a few others along the way. And it was just a dream, I think. Didn't seem like anything that was ever going to come to fruition. I worked on we worked in youth ministry. My husband was a lay youth pastor, along with having a career, a job. We owned a business. So I did a lot through our church. I wrote Bible studies, devotions. We had a church newsletter. I wrote for that. So I did a lot of writing, but
Mhm.
never anything that was as big a scope as writing a book or a novel. Uh, the first kick I got, I have two sisters that are quite a bit younger than me. And we were going to, I don't know, something they were having at their junior high school. And I was a young mother at that time. And I bumped into my old English teacher. And I actually blogged about this in one of my first blogs. Her name was Mrs. Childers. And when I saw her, I introduced myself. I said, "Do you remember me?" And she said, "I do." She said, "Do you remember my class?" I said, "Yes, I do." She said, "You wrote a short story for me. Do you remember it?" I said, "No." She said, "Well, I do." And she said,
Wow.
I asked you if I could keep it." I said, "Oh, I honestly didn't remember that." And she said, "I still have it." And I was like, okay, that's kind of weird. But she said, no, I kept it and I read it to my, now understand, I was 12 years older than my sister at the time. So this was at least 12 years later. She said, I read it to my class every year as the perfect
Wow.
example of a short story. And she looked at me and she said, I hope you're still writing. She said, because you were born to do it. And I
Wow.
was like,
What
okay.
encouragement. How
Yes, I've
exciting.
never forgotten that. So I stuck it away and thought, okay, so maybe I should write. So that just got filed away years later. And then nothing was done. After my children grew up, went to college, they've gotten married, I took a creative writing course through a college and again was told, you're good at this. You should think about doing this. What really solidified it, two things. We had a sermon or a lesson about the three servants and the buried talents. And
Mm.
God spoke to me very clearly and said, "You're going to account to me one day." So I thought, yeah, I know. Again, that I will. I started a blog a couple times and then it died off. And every year, my daughter and granddaughter and I take a girls' trip, and we were in Georgia. And my father was a special forces soldier in the infantry early years of Vietnam. And they have a museum right outside what was Fort Benning. It changed names a couple times. And we went to it. It's called the Infantry Museum. And while we walked through there, I thought, man, I wish my dad was here. I'd love to walk this with him. And we sat in front of the Vietnam Wall replica.
Mhm.
And in my mind, this story began to just run through my mind. What if I could have sat here with my dad and talked about this? And long as I can remember, I had characters in my head,
Mhm.
and stories that would just, and I thought, this is it. This is the story I need to write. And my granddaughter had interviewed Charles Martin for a high school project. He attends one of the branches of their church down here in Jacksonville. And he told her, if you want to be a writer, you just have to write. Just write. That makes you a writer. And I thought, this is it. This is the impetus I need to write this story. And I went home from that trip and I started it. And I
Oh.
just poured out the rough draft for the long road home. And that's what inspired me. It was a long, and it was indeed a long road, but it's gotten me to here where I'm at. And there were other things along the way, but that was finally what motivated me. And I think if I had a underlying story is that it's never too late to do what you need to do. And I think that's the thrust of this story. It's never too late to get things right, to find reconciliation, to heal. And in my case, it's never too late to do what God has called you or gifted you to
Absolutely.
do.
I really resonate with that, and I agree. I mean, writing, you can do that as long as you live, right? You can,
Yeah.
it's not like you're running for the Olympic medal of some sort, right? It's not an athletic as you get older. And I think with experience, well, I started writing um early. I like you, I was writing my whole life. I always loved to write, and I thought, "Oh, I'm going to be a writer. I'm going to be a writer." And I had in my mind that I was going to be like Danielle Steele or one of those and Nora Roberts and make it big and God shapes our character. And I'd
Hmm.
start writing a story and realize I had nothing, no life experience to
Yeah.
delve into to make it have any depth. They were just boring stories. There was nothing in there. And then I had a season of really, really, really hard stuff. I mean, years of huge loss, and I won't go into it, but huge loss. And I came out of that with the heart to. And then I was a Christian, I mean, a full-on Christian, and I saw that God had used all that stuff and he wanted me to use it to then minister to other people. So, like
Yeah.
you said on your website, I love this. It says, I'm going to read this out loud. To write stories that entertain is a vocation. To write stories that move one's heart and point to the Savior becomes a calling. And that
Yeah.
really, that's what you have on your website. And that really resonated with me. And like you, I was in the middle of doing all this writing, and I had several books before I actually had an agent. I had three books written. Nothing was happening. I was frustrated. I was like, why am I even doing this? What's the point? What's the point? And I went downstairs. I had a little office up in our building in the back of our property. And I went downstairs and pulled open my Bible, and there was the parable of the talents, just like what you were talking about.
Yeah.
God really spoke to me. Are you going to bury the talent I've given you? And the opportunity I've given you. I've done everything for you. Are you going to bury it? And that was very convicting. So I
Yeah.
do think, the bigger scheme of things, anybody out there that you feel like God has put something on your heart and you're making excuses, fear,
Hmm.
time issues, whatever it may be, take it to the Lord and let Him
Right.
work out all those things, because you are going to have an accounting at one time. You're going to stand before the Lord and He's going to say, "Look, I gave you all these opportunities and you didn't do anything with them. And
Yes.
look how many people you could have affected with what you do," and whatever that may be. So thank you for bringing that out. I think that's very critical. It's not just about writing, it's about one with the Lord. We are in partnership with the Holy Spirit.
Yeah.
I often say, I'm not the writer, I'm the typist.
Yeah.
You know,
That's good.
and in
It's
order to do that, you've got to be in prayer and you've got to be asking for guidance. So,
Yeah, and I think what really the very first writers conference I went to at the very end, there was the the conference organizer gave a, like, she called it a charge. And she said very clearly, she said, you may not be called to be a bestseller. In fact, she said, you may not ever even publish. You may be called to write just for a few, or maybe it's for your family, but whatever it is, God gave you something to write. Just go write. It's up to him to decide where it goes and who reads it and who sees it. And I think that really resonated with me because I was struggling which path to take to publish. And I thought he will guide it. And if it's up to him who reads this, who sees this.
right,
And it becomes, as a writer, it becomes very easy to start checking the numbers.
right,
How many books sold? How many people are seeing this? How many KU downloads? How many pages read? And pretty soon it's like, that's, if you truly are doing this because God called you to do it, then let him be the one who oversees the harvest.
Right.
If that's truly what we believe, then we sow, he reaps.
Yep.
But it's
And you got
very
to get to the
easy.
heart of it. You have to, and I've said this before, you have to know your why. If you don't know
Yeah.
your why, and if your why is that you need to make money, and that's between you and God. I mean, that may be very valid. I mean, there are writers that really do. I have a friend who really she needs to make an income if she's going to continue to
Yeah.
write. I get that, but if that becomes your full focus, then you're going to lose something in there. But
Yeah.
if your why, if you don't know your why, and then sticking with it, like you said, it's so easy to get derailed. It's so easy to look at the numbers and then all of a sudden be like, well, how come this person's got 13,000 reviews and
You're
that
right.
book wasn't even all that good and I've only got blah, blah, blah. You know,
Hmm.
it's easy. And so you have to keep coming back to the Lord. Okay, you guide it. You guide it. Your will, not mine. Your will. And it's a work of faith.
It
It
is.
is a work of faith all the time. I was at a conference. I don't know if you know who Alan Arnold is. He was at one time the acquisitions editor for Thomas Nelson Publishing for the fiction line.
Okay.
And who wouldn't want to get published by Thomas Nelson Publishing, right? But
Yeah.
he would teach classes and he ended up leaving that for a ministry, a men's ministry. I can't remember the name of it now, but he gave the most phenomenal talks and he did a class where we'd go in every day for an hour and a half during the conference and he would teach. And one of the things he would say is, you have to consider you're working alongside the Lord Jesus Christ himself. There's not a better job that you can do than working alongside that. And he said, and consider that God, like you had said, God calls you to write. But if God asked you to put that manuscript you've been working on for 5 years in a drawer and have it never see the light of day, could you do it? And that was a
Yeah.
real test of it. Okay, is it about me or is it about what God wants? And so
Right.
I I feel like anything in our lives, the older I get, I think I just feel more and more inclined to be, I just want to do your will. I just want to do your
Mhm.
will, whatever that may be. And I think you have that heart, Carrie. I
Yeah.
really do.
There's a there's actually a line in The Long Road Home, and it's a lot of the things that we put in our books are things that people think, oh, that's a brilliant line. Where'd you come up with that? Well, I'd like to say it just popped in my head, but a lot of it's no, actually someone said that to me and I thought, oh, I'm stealing that. In fact, there's a sign behind me that my daughter-in-law and son bought me for Christmas. It says, I'm a writer. Be careful what you say or do. It'll probably end up in a book. So, but a friend of mine actually said something similar to this, and I said, I'm stealing that. But she said, her ministry's prayer. That's what she does. And she said, I have read the Bible through multiple hundreds of times. And after all this time, I have to say that from Genesis to Revelation, there's not anything that God did in all those times that I can look at it and say, yes, that's exactly what I would have done, how I would have done it, and what I would have done it. She
Absolutely.
said, but he didn't ask me to understand it, agree with it. All he asked me to do was trust him.
Hmm.
And I think that is applies to just pick anything in your life, anything.
Absolutely.
And when it comes to our writing, it's the same. I don't know. Maybe he did call you to write this book, this manuscript, and maybe it was just for you to get to this point in your life where you understood what he was putting in you to write, and you read it and you go, "Oh, that's amazing." And it's like, okay, well, yes. And a lot of things that I wrote as I was doing, and maybe you've done this as you're writing, you look back, you go, where did that come from? Wow, that
Oh,
was, and it sounds like you're praising yourself, but you're not. You're like, that was
that was
that was
God.
crazy.
Well, I
And
think it's a holy, when I read something I wrote and I'm like, wow, that's so good. I know it's not me. I didn't
yeah,
write that.
yeah,
It's the Holy
several times.
Spirit.
Yeah, I would finish a chapter and I'd be sitting there in tears. I'd be crying tears. I'm like, what is happening? It's like because God had moved you to write what you just wrote. And maybe it was for me, maybe it was for somebody out there somewhere that was going to pick that up and read it that needed to hear exactly what was being said. Or when I went back and rewrote, which happened quite a few times, um, the rewrite was better than the first. And it was like, I took me out and put him in,
Right.
and that made it even better.
Right.
So it's a
I
lot.
I know that when my first book that I wrote was Providence, and I wrote it after my Christian brother committed suicide.
Mm,
And it was for me a very cathartic book to write. And it was very,
I
very
bet.
dark, very dark. And then as I did the rewrites, which I did 3 times, it became more of a hope but it was cathartic for me. And it was me going through the grieving process of losing my brother, who was my best friend when I was growing up, and being able to get to the other side of it and seeing him as a Christian who helped bring me to the Lord, bought me my first Bible, and yet took his own life, and being
Mm.
able to rectify all that and make sense of it. And part of it, my brother had bipolar disorder. It was misdiagnosed. And so he was given
Oh, wow.
that he shouldn't have been given. That was part of why he committed suicide. But when I wrote the story, I was really afraid when that came out because we don't talk about suicide in the church. We don't talk about mental illness in the
No.
church. I had people literally, women in my Bible study literally say, well, you know, your brother went to hell because he committed suicide. I mean, say
Huh.
that flat out to me. I had people said, well, if he only had enough faith, you wouldn't have a mental illness. And to me, that's offensive. And I'm
Yeah.
sorry if you believe that, and I'm offending you by saying that, but it's
No, not
offensive.
at all. Quite the
It's
opposite.
offensive. And so when I that book came out, I'm like, oh my word, what's going to come back with the reviews, right? I can't tell you how many people said, finally, finally,
Yeah.
somebody gets my pain and
Yeah.
understands. And I think that's why God had me write that story. It
Yeah.
wasn't because it was going to be a bestseller. It was because it was supposed to touch on a topic that a lot of people struggle with and nobody wants to talk about.
Yeah.
So,
No,
you know,
that's fantastic. And I think that, and then those are the things where it's like, I don't even know that I would have even wanted to read the reviews because who cares? Because you wrote what people needed to hear. And if that only touched a few people and it helped them heal from something so traumatic and so devastating, I think it would be worth getting bad reviews because you would
right.
need to know that there were people who needed that, just
Right.
like you, who were being fed something so dishonorable to what Christ did for us,
Mhm.
that they would need to hear the truth about, yeah, what you wrote. So that's good for you. I'm glad you
Well,
did that.
yeah, my first series was more women's fiction. My second series more Southern fiction romance, but still I like to have depth. I don't,
Hmm.
I'm not formulaic. I know some people love to devour romance novels and they can go through them really quick and they don't want to think too much. They just want to enjoy, and there's a place for that. I can't write that way. God
Yeah.
didn't build me that way. But it's, stories that are inspired. The second book I wrote was inspired by my daughter's traumatic brain injury and put it in a family, a Christian pastor's family with a big dark secret that comes to light so it's how pastors react to things when they're trying to grow their church and they're trying to be popular pastors, and then their family doesn't fall into line the way they think they should, and how it affects them. And all of a sudden you lose your Christ view of things and it becomes more personal. So it's just, to me, it's kind of fun to bring out some of that depth and hard. It's
Yeah.
cathartic. I had an
Well,
agent and I asked her one time, I said, I've had all these things happen. I said, my next book, do I have to have another trauma happen in order to come up with another book? And she goes, well, tell me about your life. This is before she became
mm,
my agent. So, and was at a women's writers retreat, like you were talking about. There were 10 of us all together, and she happened to be invited, and I didn't know her. And so I went through the whole thing. She goes, honey, I think you've got enough angst, depth, and emotional mess to get you through the rest of your life. I think you can pull from that forever. I said, well, that's good because I just don't want to. I'm not praying for another hard thing to happen to have more to write
yeah.
about.
No, and I wondered too, and I don't know that this is what it is, but I know that my book starts out with, I mean, okay, The Long Road Home. It's not romance, although there's a little bit of relationship stuff in there. In fact, it was actually Ava Marie Averson at the first conference. I got to go to lunch with her before the conference started. It was super cool. And she asked me, she goes, so do you write romance? And I said, no. She goes, oh, that's too bad. I'm like, no, I like what I write. And so I know that there's a lot of demand for that as far as it's the biggest selling thing of all. But mine is more just family and relationship driven. And my second book that I'm writing now is about three generations of women, a grandmother, her daughter and her granddaughter and their relationships ongoing and reconciliation again. I do that a lot. Home. And it starts out with the granddaughter in a divorce situation. So it may not be what everybody wants to read in a Christian novel. It's like it doesn't, it's not all clean and pretty and but then life isn't. And I think maybe that's I was on a thread of Christian writers and she was asking that question about her book. And most people were saying, no, I don't like to read where there's divorce or this or that. And I just said, you know what? My first editor told me life isn't all neat and tidy and pretty. And sometimes we need to portray what life is like, and it doesn't
Absolutely.
always end up in a neat little bow. And a lot of people need to read true stories and then see Christ redeeming in it. And it
Exactly.
doesn't always end happy, and that's okay.
No,
And
part
so,
of it too, though, you look at it like I had somebody, one of my reviews said, I don't like books unless the characters are all perfect. And it's like, well, what's the point? We're not perfect. Where's the growth arc in that?
oh,
How do we come to that point? And how does it minister? I think like you and like me, we want to minister to the hearts of people that have been hurt and give
mhm.
them hope.
Yeah.
If you're already perfect, where's the hope in that? You've
They weren't
already.
even. I saw a guy wearing a T-shirt the other day. He was at our job site. It said all my role models went to prison, and and he it was Paul, Peter. I mean, all the
Exactly.
Moses. It
Yeah,
was
who
like
was perfect in the Bible? Nobody.
exactly,
Hello.
yeah.
Who made the greatest decisions? Nobody ever.
One of my favorite stories from my first when I hired my editors at the first conference, it was two of them, and I won't even name them because they're very well known. But they had my first rough draft. Well, two things I learned a lot. First, I learned that I had a story, not a novel, and I learned so much, and I developed that. Just because you read novels doesn't mean you know how to write one.
Exactly.
Point in
There is a
fact.
craft, there is a learning to this craft. You do need to
Yes.
just learn
A-
things.
And I poured a year and a half into really learning how to do that. The second was when she came back, we had one of our first meetings, she told me about my main character. She said, I want to tell you something. She said, Deanna. I said, yeah. She said, some of your readers may not, well, how do I put this? She said, she comes across as, and she kept saying words. I said, snarky. She said, yeah, that's it. She said, and I'm on the verge of not liking her.
Yeah, I've heard that before too.
And I went, okay. And she started saying things about it. Well, I had written her in a way that she was, fearful and a little insecure. And she covered it up with this,
Snarkiness.
humor. Yeah. And I thought, well, I just got a free therapy session because it was, okay, you might not like me too much either. And I was, okay. So I rewrote, I gentled her. I took off a few of her rough edges. And it wasn't mean snarky. She just had a, snarky edge. And I thought, well, but then I had other people who had read it, beta readers, they like, no, I like her. She reminds me of you. And I thought, well, that didn't help.
Well, part of it though, when you think about it, is if you can, as you're writing these characters and they're not likable, if you can get to the heart of who they are quickly and people are seeing that this is their defense mechanism or this is how they regard life and that type of
Yeah.
thing, why are they coming from where they're coming from? I had Alan Arnold say that my Melissa in my first book is not that likable, and I did soften her. She was angry in the beginning because her husband was always working late. So I did soften that some, and it does help people to get in there.
Right.
But
And
to
I
some
get that.
extent, if you can make that make sense, it's helpful. There are snarky people out there and they're funny. They're-
Yeah. Well, I guess if you don't hear, and I think, and I get this, if people are reading, it's like when you read text. I don't like texting because
Right.
people
Emotion.
misinterpret. Yeah, you don't hear people speaking. So I guess if you're reading, you're going to read the tone that you want to read, and you can't hear what I'm hearing in my head. So you have to be so careful. And looking back, I understood it, but at the time, it was so funny because I'm like, oh, I you don't like her? Well, I'm writing. She's very similar to me right now. So and then when my friend said, "No, she reminds me of you," I'm like, "Oh, great." That explains why my phone
That
never
didn't help.
rings.
That didn't help, did it?
That did not help me at all.
That's funny. Oh, I do. They
But
do
it was,
say you write a little bit of yourself in the characters. There's a part of you in those characters, and
yeah.
as you develop more books, like for me right now, the book I'm working on, as I am taking, I do a, so I had a psychology background. I had a bachelor's in psychology, and I taught middle school for years, which that psychology background came in very handy, let me tell you.
Oh, I
But
bet.
I so I love to delve into personalities when I'm like, here's my story. What personality type would kind of fit that because they'd fall in, it would be more of a difficulty for them. So their personalities become a conflict as well. They're their own worst enemies in a way.
Yeah.
So I go through it and I started developing this personality. I started looking into it. I'm like, wow, and this is so much different than I am. I'm like, this sounds like my daughter. And I texted my daughter. I said, hey, Nikki, are you a four with a wing of five? She goes, I have no idea, Mom. And I said, well, let me send you something. So I sent her the description. She goes, wow, that sounds just like me. I said, yeah, you're going to have to help me with this because I don't get you at all. So I'm going to need some help explaining why this character would feel the way she does because I can't do it on my own. So you
Yeah.
start seeing, you have, in a way, you have to kind of get out of that comfort zone to create characters that are not like, so that you're, because I notice a lot of top, I'm not saying Christian authors, although I've seen this with a lot of Christian authors too. Top authors are writing books and their characters are so similar. All they're doing is changing, they're just changing the plot line and they're keeping the
Hmm.
characters the same. And I don't, after a while, I'm kind of bored. I'm like, it sounds like, we're just watching another episode of some television show
Right.
where character growth isn't happening. And so I
Hmm.
struggle with that, and so it's,
Yeah.
and that's natural because it's easy for us to do that. It's easy to fall into that, you know, it just makes it simpler.
Right. I could really see that happening. That's where this next book that I'm writing, these three women, and I really liked the idea of writing about three strong women and finding, and I read a lot about character development and for them to pursue what their what their biggest desire is identify their biggest fear and the opposite. And it's been really fun to develop them, especially this first draft and then to change it all up. But writing from three different views
Hmm.
is a challenge. It's like braiding hair perfectly and keeping the braids even. But
Because they
it's
can't be
fun.
the same people. They can't have the same issues.
Mm-mm, no. In fact, with The Long Road Home, I originally wrote it in third person. And my editor, she said, why aren't you writing this in first person? I said, because I don't want people to think it's me. It's my story. She said, Kerri, they're going to think that anyway.
They
That's
are.
just, don't worry about it. She goes, I think that you will be able to put more emotion
Mhm.
into it from a first person. So I had finished it. I rewrote the whole thing in first person and it did. It was a lot better that way. But so this one, I'm doing each point of view in third person. But I'm really enjoying, I'm hoping I can get it done and out by summer, but we're building a house and
So,
that's taking a lot out of me and I don't have a lot of time, but I want to because I'm also blogging and trying to keep a newsletter going. And that's a lot,
it is a lot.
but it is. But I'm
Lot.
like, you know what? There's no. I think this first book, I need to get my name out. I need to get some recognition, and and the story. And this my next one. I'll get to work on that, and hopefully, maybe by the end of this year, I'll get the next one out. So
Yeah,
that's my hope.
it's hard when you get super busy and you're trying to juggle so many things at one time. It gets really
Hmm.
difficult. But well,
Yeah.
I'm excited for this next book and where you're going with this. And yeah,
Yeah.
I know here you have this first book out, and when I started, like I said, I was like pushed to write 3 books a year.
I
So
don't know how people do.
I know I don't know how I did. That's when I was trying to decide on self-publishing, my husband was very instrumental because he'd been saying for a long time, why can't you just do one a year? And I asked my publisher, she goes, oh, no, no, people expect more. Well, two of them were novellas and people don't buy those. You need to keep your name out there. And none of the stuff that I was told made a whit of difference. It didn't make any difference really.
Mm,
So, so when I decided to go self-publishing, I did write a Christmas novella. I'd always written one, but God said, "You're not selling that. You're giving that one away." So
mm,
it kind of released me from trying to keep that. I was trying to keep that pace, and I'm not. like there's just too many. There's ministry opportunities that go by the wayside because I'm so busy, stuck in my office all the time, and
Yeah.
you have to balance it and see where it is that God wants you to be,
Yeah.
and what it's
Right.
supposed to produce.
There is. Well, I did learn two things. They say even if, when you're self-publishing, there's a lot you can do, a lot of hats you can wear, but the two most important things to have professionally done is your cover and your editing. And
Absolutely.
the cover I did, I hired someone for that, and I'm looking at it now, and I think I could have had that done better. I had input on it, but when I compare it to other covers, I mean, it looks professionally done, but I think I could have had a better cover. But it is what it is.
Right.
The editing, I had somewhat. I mean, a I had a professional editor on the one part of it, and then the other I did some other things with it. But it is a lot of beta readers.
Hmm.
I had some good beta readers help me with that, so it went through a lot of editing, and I was pretty happy with that. But I think for a first book, I was happy with the process, and I liked self-publishing. I did. I enjoyed it, but I'm kind of a nerd that way.
Well, I think anything is a learning curve. And for me, I tend to, like when I was telling you when I started the podcast, I had to learn how to do all this stuff that kind of was like, oh, I don't think I can do that. And then when I did get to where I was got all my books back, I was trying to format 15 books at one time and I'd never done one. And then hiring all that stuff so it it seems overwhelming, and then all of a sudden you get that under your belt, and okay, that's not so hard. Now I know how to do it. Now I'm showing other
Hmm.
people how to do it. Now it's not okay, it's very easy. But when you're first facing something you've never done before, it's daunting
Yes,
because
it is.
you don't know, and you don't know if you're going to do this right or that right. And so yeah, but it is fun, and it's fun that you have the control. I think that makes a difference, um, to have that control of what goes in and what doesn't. Like my publisher would not allow me to put at the back of my books, if you enjoyed this, please leave a review. Oh, we don't do that. Yeah, our
Really?
readers don't like that. It's like, how can your readers not? I mean, what do they care? So
No.
those kinds of little things that I thought were odd,
Mm.
but now I'm in control. I can put anything I want on the. If I want to put the Roman road on the back of my book, I can write the Roman road on the back of my book. Whatever. It's my book.
Oh, I even went back and added discussion questions for book clubs
Oh, that's
because
a
I've had
great
a
idea.
couple people ask me, can you get us some discussion questions? Because I belong to a book club and I really want to encourage my book. And I've had two people recommend this to their book club.
Right.
So,
Yeah,
and so yeah, I did. I put them in there. So,
that's nice. I ended up with, I have cousins that are like second cousins, twice removed, all that live in Maine, far away, and I don't even know them that well because we never grew up together. Grew up in the East Coast, we grew up in the West Coast. But they all kind of get together and do a book club, and they said, we want to do your book. That was weird, to sit
yeah.
in, and they did it like via Zoom kind of thing, Facebook thing. That was kind of weird to be
Oh, they
involved.
invited you. How
Yes. Well, they said
cool.
they always do book clubs, and they thought, well, with you being the author, so I was like really nervous about it, but it went really well. It was kind of fun to have that
Yeah.
interaction with them on that level and to be part of that. So it's kind of fun if you can be part of a book club to go in. I know I have a friend who has actually oh, is open to the idea of visiting these book clubs, and they go in there and ask questions. I think that's a great thing if you can get your name out there and figure that one out. That would be an
Yeah.
interesting in your neighborhood. So,
Well, I've got a lot of ideas, but like I said, I feel like once I get a second book out there, I'm going to come back. I'm working on an audio version of The Long Road Home. Um, and I'm against some people's better judgment. I'm going to narrate it myself for cost alone.
yeah.
We'll see how that goes. I polled people, and some people say they really like the author to read the book themselves. I looked at the cost of having it hired out, and it's just way out of my ability to fund that. And some people say it's better to have a less than perfect version than no version. You
Yeah.
need an audiobook. That's what they say.
Yeah.
So I thought, the worst thing that can happen is people don't like it. I just,
Well, if,
I
it
don't
doesn't
know.
make a difference. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, this has been so much fun, Carrie. I've really
Thank you.
appreciated you coming on here, and I hope when you get your second book done, you want to come back out here, talk to us again about that, and we'll see where that goes. But I wish you the best with this book. I'm excited. I can't wait to dig into it and read it myself. So
Oh, I appreciate that so much. And worst comes to worst, I'll drive up to your place. We'll meet for coffee. I
let's
enjoyed
do
it that
that.
much.
Hey, let's do. In fact, I
I
was in your area last July. I just didn't know you. We were down. My one of my husband's close friends was having a birthday party, and he lives in Jupiter, so we were down doing the whole,
Mhm.
Savannah, Charleston. We even went to Myrtle Beach, which I personally I was not impressed with, but
It used to be way cooler. I went there as a kid. They've changed it. But if you're ever down here, look me up. If I come up
I
north, I'll find you.
will do that. Thank you so much.
Okay.
It's been fun.
Thank you. It was great being here.
Bye.